Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, first and foremost, I want to give a big thank you out to Mr. Chris N., who joined up on the Brett Good tier over on Patreon at patreon.com/pack_daddy. As I mentioned, this is now my full-time gig. Yes, we have ads running. That's kind of there just to almost kind of pay the bills. So very much counting on you guys and your support to help me keep the dream alive. I appreciate all your support over these years. It's been, I think, 8 years. This coming year will be year 9 doing the podcast. So it's been a long time, and you guys have always supported me, and I appreciate that, and I hope that you will continue to do so. And if you're not, I hope that you would consider it. So what I thought would happen today, it's still relatively early. If any news comes, obviously we will change topics quickly. Any breaking news, we'll do a breaking news thing. With that said, we've touched on the coaching thing a lot over the last several days, and there's a lot of things popping up on the offseason / NFL draft thing that we haven't touched on, that a lot of people are pivoting to, and for good reason. And at the very least, we need to lay out sort of the timeline, what's happening, when it's happening, why it matters, all that kind of stuff, just to kind of lay the foundation, especially for people who are kind of, agreeing to my terms of please don't leave, this is going to be a fun offseason. Let me do a little introduction into some of the events that we have coming up rather soon. That's one of the things that always shocks me about the offseason. I always feel like I have to just find filler because there's never anything to talk about. And it's like every week, it's like, bro, you got this coming up like tomorrow. Like, holy crap, man, we got to get work going here. So that will be the plan. We'll see how long it takes. I mean, it can take as long as I want it to, I suppose, depending on how deep you want to go, considering we've covered nothing. This certainly could fill some time, but that'll be sort of the plan today. I think we'll start with the schedule, kind of the off-season schedule period, and then maybe zoom in a little bit on some of the more recent or more quickly upcoming events. Let me just touch on a couple things here real quick. First of all, wide receiver Adam Thielen has announced he is retiring from the NFL. Been a long time coming. He's obviously going to retire on Minnesota Vikings, so that's obviously cool for him and that fan base. What else we got here? Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, we're going to be doing this thing again where we go through the off-season will he, won't he. Will be probably depending on, he's very slow in making decisions, so I doubt he'll make a decision soon. So that'll give us a lot of time to speculate, which is fun for me. There's going to be a lot of talk about will he come back for the Vikings. I guarantee that's going to be a major storyline. There was this, however. I shouldn't even say however, because it still makes sense, but Ari seems to think something different. Steelers owner Art Rooney on Aaron Rodgers' future said, Aaron came here to play for Mike, as in Mike Tomlin, so it will most likely affect his decision. So Ari then says, sounds like we've seen the end of Aaron Rodgers. Now, again, I don't know how those two things necessarily connect, unless I'm missing something. I mean, it sounds like Art Rooney doesn't believe Rodgers wants to come back. Potentially he doesn't want him to come back because you would think you would handle that differently, although a lot of owners are stupid and don't know how to speak to the media or all that kind of stuff. But that has nothing, Aaron Rodgers has to decide if he wants to play and then find a place to play. And the only question then becomes, will he be able to find a place to play? And I think he played relatively well this year. You feel like every year it gets lower and lower, the idea that you're going to be able to find a job if you're Aaron Rodgers. But I think what happened after the Steelers compared to what happened after the Jets might have actually boosted his stock. And so a team like the Vikings, although I kind of doubt it, but, it's fun speculation, could potentially look at that and be like, this could be the guy that can get us over the hump. I don't know. We can look at other teams at another time, but just figured I'd mention that. He still has to go off and make his decision. It doesn't sound like he'll be back with the Steelers, and so he'll have to decide if he wants to play. Probably part of that is gauging how much interest there is in him and what teams those could possibly be, because you don't want to be Aaron Rodgers and say, guys, I'm coming back, and then nobody really wants you except some teams you don't want to go to, and then you end up saying, never mind, I'm retiring. That's kind of embarrassing. But I'm sure he's going to take quite a bit of time to just go relax, decompress, hang out in the mountains somewhere, and then we'll work on making that decision. And then we've got a little bit of Matt LaFleur stuff. It's really nothing massive, and of course it's Schefter, which every time Schefter speaks, we have to pretend he has new information. It annoys the crap out of me, but we'll play along. So I'll tell you what, why don't we just play what Schefter said? And just keep in mind, this is not, it's hilarious to me because the question asked to him is there any new news? And he said, yes. And then goes on to explain how there really isn't any new news, but we can further speculate based on information that we're all privy to already, which is that a deal hasn't been done yet. So here is a little bit of that.
Sounds like there might be some disagreement there. Are there any updates since yesterday?
Yeah, there's no deal right now. And it's a negotiation. And when there's a negotiation and there's no deal, there could be a breakthrough any moment. And again, I think both sides would like to make that happen. But it's now 7:37 Central Time on Wednesday. And they've been trying to do this for a little while. And they still have not gotten it figured out. And the longer it lingers out there, the more you wonder where it's going to go and how it's going to result. I think right now, the way that I would interpret it.
Okay, just so we're all clear, and I appreciate him, accentuating that point that it's his interpretation. But this crap annoys me to no end.
The way I would interpret it right now is it's up in the air.
Wow. Riveting stuff. And there's articles written and all this other stuff out there. But, they brought in Schefter to say the breaking news is that there's no news, and the fact that it hasn't been done in like 48 hours, something like that, means that there currently isn't a deal, and we don't know what's going to happen yet. Jeez, that's breaking news, everybody. Breaking news. Now, again, we all have our own different, I think some people feel like the longer it goes on, the worse it is, which is a fair assumption. Right? It means that they haven't come to a deal and there's some kind of a problem. I think on the flip side of that, as I have pointed out, the longer it goes, the more comfortable it feels like they're going to get it done. Even if they don't have a number, it's a question of, okay, we're going to do it. It's just a negotiation, right? They don't have a deal done with Gutekunst either. I don't think that's a question. I think they're going to do Matt LaFleur first and then Gutekunst. Or, agree to something with Matt and then whatever the particular order is, but they're going to figure the Matt LaFleur thing out because they have to. And again, if it goes on for a really long time, that tells me they already have it figured out, and that is that they're going to pay him. They just don't know what that number is going to be yet. It's kind of like, again, the fact that John Eric Sullivan is out the door tells me pretty much everything I need to know about Brian Gutekunst. There was never a question about, hey, just hang out a little bit or whatever. And obviously, if you have a job offer on the table, but there didn't seem to be any urgency for the Packers to make any decisions or anything like that. It was just kind of, they're just going to let him walk out the door. I would assume that would be the top candidate to replace him if there was any question. But, that is the big breaking news about Matt LaFleur. And, I do expect a decision relatively soon. But let's put it this way. You're going to start seeing coaches get hired. And once those dominoes start to fall, if a decision isn't made, then I think the decision has been made. Because they can't sit here and just watch all the coaches go off the board, which they're kind of already doing because, Harbaugh's going to be gone. Not that I want him, but he's going to be gone very soon. He's meeting with the Giants today. That'll be done very soon. A lot of these dominoes are going to start to fall. And, as of this moment, it seems as though the Packers don't care because guess how many interviews they've held with other coaches? 0. While every other team out there has had 2, 3, 4, 5 different coaching meetings, virtual, this, that, and the other. They've done all kinds of crazy meetings and phone calls and all kinds of stuff. Packers have done 0. Anywho, let's transition to this little bit of news. there's a reason for this outside of being super entirely random. Oregon safety Dylan Thieneman is leaving school early to declare for the NFL draft, he tells ESPN. He's one of the NFL draft's top safeties and a projected top 50 pick. Thieneman earned first-team All-Big Ten honors in 2025 and second-team All-American honors. The reason I bring that up is that today, for me, is January 14th. January 14th is the last day of eligibility. So anybody that wants to, that is an underclassman that would like to declare early has to get what's called special eligibility. And so today is the last day to essentially ask permission from the NFL for special eligibility, which is tweeted out as, is reported as declared for the NFL draft. Now, the exception would be for this championship game. So anybody that's involved in the championship game, there is a later date that they're allowed to. The game is scheduled for January 19th. They're given a grace period until January 23rd. But everybody else, if they're not declared by today, then they are presumed going back to school tomorrow. So we'll see if there are a flurry more of these. I'm not even sure exactly how many are still hanging out there in terms of will they, won't they kind of thing. I'm guessing most of that is settled by now. But that is the first step in the calendar, and that is today, yesterday for you. January 17th and 18th, obviously, are the divisional playoffs. Again, we will be doing a live stream hate watch of the Chicago Bears game, in which hopefully the Rams will pummel the living crap out of the Chicago Bears. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. But that's what that is. Then you have January 25th, which is the AFC and NFC championship games. So, again, still have plenty of football going on. Then, on January 27th, we have the first sort of big event of the college football season. So actually, why don't we take a break here, because I want to kind of zoom in a little bit on a couple of these things. And remember, football isn't even over yet. We haven't had the Super Bowl or the stupid Pro Bowl that nobody freaking cares about. But let's take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so on January 27th, we're talking just a couple weeks from now, we have the first big NFL draft event, which is the East-West Shrine Bowl. It's very much overshadowed by the Senior Bowl, which is just a couple days later, but it is still a major event. It's one of the first, and this is where I get bogged down in notes, because you've got guys like Tony Pauline and whatnot that are pumping out content. Who shined, who looked good, who looked this, that, or the other. It's all very big news about NFL draft prospects. East-West Shrine Bowl is one of the longest-running college all-star games, and the purpose is to raise money for Shriners, which is where the East-West Shrine Bowl comes from. East and West essentially just represents the different parts of the United States, so the eastern part against the western part. There are practices, there are interviews, as well as games, so there's plenty of content to come out of there. And the biggest thing is that this does take place in partnership with the NFL. So you have NFL clubs that are there all week. So there are going to be Green Bay Packers people there. It doesn't usually have quite the firepower that the Pro Bowl does, which is part of the reason why it's not seen as, it's a little bit more day 2, 3 prospects as opposed to 1, 2. It's also just a bit, for whatever reason, maybe it's the nice weather. I don't know. All the media, because they're so close together, just again a couple days apart, everybody flocks to the Senior Bowl. So the media coverage of East-West Shrine, although that's in Texas, so it's not like the weather's any worse. It's not as much. If they could spread that out a little bit, maybe you'd have media in both. Senior Bowl also has a little bit of a cooler structure in which you have NFL coaches actually running it, as in they are taking over the coaching, they are running the practices, all that stuff. So it's a little bit more, useful in that way. The other most important thing is, and you always have to keep this in mind, you never know who the Packers are going to draft. You know that they're out there, which is crazy, and it's I don't know, it's such a fun thing for me because, you can go backwards and read some of this stuff. But as you're reading it, as you're going through, as you get a report, Jim Smith from Auburn, had a great day, you realize, that could be a Packers 4th, 5th round pick. Let me read this article here. Won't do the whole thing, but you'll get the idea pretty quick. East-West Shrine Bowl breaks down 6 Packers rookies. The Green Bay Packers added 6 rookies who played in the East-West Shrine Bowl, led by draft picks Warren Brinson and John Williams. In the article, it says, you'll see him in training camp, 6'5", 315 off the bus. You're like, who the heck is that guy? He had the benefit of playing in a rotation at Georgia with other 1st and 2nd round picks and maybe never quite hit the ceiling that he showed in flashes. But I think at worst, even if he's a rotational guy in the NFL too, that's a pretty talented guy who can pass rush, who can swim move, who can bowl through guys as well, talking about Warren Brinson. Packers' final pick of the draft was used on Cincinnati offensive lineman John Williams, who was the Bearcats' starting left tackle last 2 seasons. He fits the Packers' mold as a college left tackle with the ability to play multiple positions. GM Brian Gutekunst thought Williams could play all 5 spots. He talks about how there's some similarities between him and Zach Tom. Zach Tom, also a Shrine Bowl guy. In addition, you had Nazir Stackhouse, Kentucky linebacker Jamon Johnson, who we just talked about recently, Tyron Herring, another guy that we've been hearing about recently. I think Jamon and Tyron are both have been re-signed to the Packers, as well as Minnesota guy Tyler Cooper. So all these different guys that we've come to know over the last year, all of them are guys that if you were watching the Shrine Bowl, you are getting to know them. You're getting to hear about them. You're getting reports about these guys. Some of the guys that are going to be at the Shrine Bowl that potentially might want to keep an eye on. Cincinnati Bearcats defensive tackle Dante Corleone. Beautiful last name. Possibly a 3rd round pick defensive tackle, another defensive lineman, Darrell Jackson Jr. out of Florida State. Edge rusher out of Florida, Tyreek Sapp. Edge rusher Anthony Lucas out of USC. UCF edge rusher Malachi Lawrence. Jaden Roberts, interior offensive lineman out of Alabama. DJ Campbell, interior offensive lineman out of Texas. DeMonte Capehart, defensive tackle out of Clemson. Edge rusher Patrick Payton out of LSU. Devon Marshall, cornerback out of NC State. Emil Wagner, who was an offensive tackle. Pat Coogan, who was an interior guy. And I'm skipping lots of other guys. Linebackers, wide receivers. These are just kind of our primary needs. But the point is, I'm all the way down to 167. We're still in the draftable category. Again, kind of mid to late, but all still draftable. In fact, I would take that a step further, considering how many are here. This list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on that are going to be at the Shrine Bowl. The odds that we draft 0 of these guys are low. The odds that we bring in 0, including the UDFAs, is 0. It's absolutely 0. So it's always good to hear, because the other thing too, and this is especially true of the Senior Bowl, the Packers have a pretty solid connection as far as liking big Senior Bowl guys. But the cool thing is when you go back and look, you'll see little things like, oh, this guy really stood out in the Shrine Bowl. This guy really stood out in the Senior Bowl. And you think, you know what? I wish I'd have paid attention to that. Again, that's much more true of the Senior Bowl, but that's always going to be a thing. Guys can all of a sudden pop out in these kinds of bowl games and kind of change the way, some teams will take it more seriously than others. And when guys pop off the tape, there are some teams who come out and they're like, all right, that's our guy. We got to go get that guy for sure. All right, speaking of the Senior Bowl, that's kind of the big one. Again, East-West Shrine, I don't know why nobody shows it any love. Nobody wants to talk about it. I have to dig and dig and dig to try to find some details on it. But the Senior Bowl is the big one. That's the one everybody's excited about. And again, you've got bigger prospects. As of right now, there is a top 10 prospect, David Bailey, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. He is currently a top 10 prospect. We'll see what happens, but he is at the Senior Bowl, as well as several other first to potentially first-round picks. T.J. Parker out of Clemson, Kevin Concepcion out of Texas A&M, Caleb Banks out of Florida, Emmanuel Pregnon, whatever, out of Oregon. Jennings Dunker, Romello Heights, R. Mason Thompson, potential first-round picks here, LT Overton. So it's a bigger event with bigger names. That will be January 31st. So, again, we're talking just 4 days later. That's the big one. And we got Oregon quarterback Dante Moore is planning to announce his decision about whether he will or won't enter the NFL draft on ESPN Sports Center at 2:30 Eastern Time. So that's a really big one. That's one that'll send ripple effects all the way down, because you're talking about a quarterback that could go, as high as, 1 or 2, depending on, trades or whatever. If that doesn't happen, then, the ripple effects of who gets a quarterback, where they get a quarterback, and all that stuff change. The Packers have kind of a reputation, at least among Packer fans. It might be several teams who have this situation, but they have a reputation right now for going hard after guys that pop off at the Senior Bowl. Let me read you an example here. Brett Whitefield over at FTN Fantasy wrote, Senior Bowl top takeaways, Christian Watson. February 8th, 2022, North Dakota State wide receiver Christian Watson came into Senior Bowl week as a relative unknown to most. After a good showing in Mobile and being awarded the National Team Wide Receiver of the Week, the buzz on Watson has gotten borderline out of control. The crazy part is Watson wasn't originally included on the Senior Bowl roster and was a late addition just days before the event. Long story short, I'm here to answer the question asked by the people who don't have the opportunity to watch him in practice. Quote, is the hype on Watson legit? The answer to that question is yes and then some. Watson is absolutely the real deal. Here's a little something from Chase Goodbread over at NFL.com. 2022 NFL Draft, 6 takeaways on Senior Bowl standouts. Number 1 actually talks about Kenny Pickett, but it says, as a highlight, a solid performance from Christian Watson. Kenny Pickett certainly made the most of his chance at the Senior Bowl with a perfect 6 of 6 for 89 yards and a touchdown to Baylor's Abram Smith, giving the national squad a 7-0 lead late in the first quarter. It was perfect from a statistical standpoint, at least. His longest completion of 38 yards to North Dakota State Christian Watson was significantly underthrown, but Watson made a very tough adjustment to catch the pass near his feet, fell untouched, then got up to extend the play another 20 or so yards before being tackled at the American 15. Goes on to talk about why it was all the way that it was or whatever, but there you go, Christian Watson making Kenny Pickett look good. And then one more here from David Harrison over at Sports Illustrated. Senior Bowl Day 2 report, who shined in the rain? The second one down here after Dylan Parham out of Memphis is Christian Watson, wide receiver out of North Dakota State. Weather can raise the difficulty level and adds chips to the ante for prospects at the Senior Bowl. A lot of footballs found grass after slipping from the grass of receivers on Wednesday thanks to constant rain, especially during the first practice session of the day. One receiver who consistently found ways to bring in passes despite the rain was Watson, a day one standout for his fluid route running and ability to win against various defenders. His competitive spirit is obvious when watching him fight for the position against defensive backs, and his hands came through for him in a big way on Wednesday. Zero chance he's not on every team's board at this point. Hilariously, the very next guy on this list, Malik Willis. The 2025 class, by the way, didn't really help the Packers shake the reputation that they have about the Senior Bowl. Anthony Belton was a big standout in the Senior Bowl. Savion Williams had a good Senior Bowl, as did Barron Sorrell and Colin Oliver. So, again, the Senior Bowl is a big one. I mentioned some of the guys at the top of the list that we are probably not going to get unless they fall kind of massively. But looking at sort of more of a back of the first round and then some type of situation, edge rusher Zion Young out of Missouri, tackle Isaiah World out of Oregon, Danny Dennis Sutton, edge rusher out of Penn State, Dominique Orange, defensive lineman out of Iowa State, Julian Neal, cornerback out of Arkansas, Devin Moore, cornerback out of Florida, Jake Slaughter, interior offensive lineman out of Florida, Gabe Jackus, edge rusher out of Illinois, kind of second-ish, third-ish round guys. I mean, it is a lot of guys. The amount of people that are going to be there is pretty wild. So, most, let's call it like what? Well, second, third, fourth round guys. You're talking like 50% are going to be at this thing. So it's a pretty big deal. Okay, let's take a break here. We'll come back and rip through the rest of this off-season schedule. We'll be right back. So that brings us to the end of January. February 3rd, you have the Pro Bowl games again. Who freaking cares? And then February 8th is the Super Bowl. And at this point, as long as it's not the Bears, I think I will be happy with anybody that is in or wins the Super Bowl. By the way, just woke up from like a 4-hour nap, so I'm back. A little bit of news here. Rob Demovsky has now reported on ESPN Wisconsin, talks have progressed where it would be surprising at this point if LaFleur isn't the coach. Sorry, stupid thing got turned down. I'm assuming you heard that. And again, nothing is for sure, but as I said, it just obviously felt like this was the direction it was going to go. Obviously, a lot of people are in favor of this being the right decision, especially outside of Green Bay. It's borderline unanimous if you speak to any national media people or whatever. It doesn't super sway my personal opinion, but again, at the very least, we know that some things that are good are going to stay. I think at this point, I'm more concerned about whether or not, I shouldn't even say concerned. I'm interested to see what direction we go in when it comes to the defense. I don't want to suddenly become a Hafley hater, but, again, as I look back at the performance of this team, I do think it largely underperformed. I'd have to go back and look at what it did with Micah Parsons, but it is pretty disappointing to have, even if you say, okay, Rashawn is terrible, and, a bunch of other people that I don't think are terrible are just the worst. I don't know, but I mean, pretty high expectations, and I feel like we're really lowering the bar if we're looking at it going, I don't know, top 10 to 12-ish, 13-ish, 15-ish is adequate. No, it's absolutely not in that situation. Absolutely not. But obviously, Hafley looks like he could be going out the door, and now DeMarcus Covington is getting interviews to be a defensive coordinator, which is, again, devastating to think that our whole situation is being blown up. But on the opposite side, you kind of look at it and think, I don't know. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Just like with the GM, I don't want to say that this is my firm opinion because I haven't really looked into it. But just as sort of a casual thought, as I kind of stop and look back, is like, that actually I don't think was good enough. I'm gonna be honest. The next thing that comes up is February 17th. So, again, it's like every week there's another thing. February 17th, beginning this date, through 4 p.m. Eastern Time on March 3rd, clubs may designate franchise tag or transition players. Now, this doesn't really matter for the Packers because I can't imagine anybody necessarily fits that billing. I don't think anyone's getting franchise tagged. The reason it does matter is for free agency, because by this time we will have had conversations about, who could potentially be available, blah, 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 blah. And as I've said about free agency, you've got sort of a pre-free agency group and then a post or during free agency group. And the reason I say that is because there's a list of people that are just listed as free agents. The problem is most of these guys are going to end up staying, some of which are going to stay via some form of a tag, or tag if you are a hardcore Wisconsinite. Constantly get into battles back and forth fighting over my kids with that one. What did you call it? A bag? Oh, did you say bag? Yeah, bag. No, you say bag. No, you say bag. I think I'm losing that war, but I might have one of my kids on the side of the normal. But a lot of people that we think are going to be free agents because their contracts are running out are not actually going to be free agents. And then there's a bunch of other people that become free agents because their teams let them go. That's sort of a more of a deep dive into free agency, is looking at potential cut candidates. But this becomes important because it starts to answer some of that question. Will these people become available? Now, I'm guessing when the dust clears, and this may not be the case, but I'm guessing the Packers are not going to be massive heavy hitters, meaning anybody that could potentially be tagged is probably not going to be on our watch list anyway. But that, we'll have to see. Some of these positions are worth less money than others. It's possible you could be looking at an interior offensive lineman or, something. But then you get the Mac Daddy. Up until the draft, this is the big one. February 23rd, so again, just about a week after that opens, you have the beginning of the NFL scouting combine, which takes place at Lucas Oil Stadium. Now, one of the unfortunate things that's happened, and this is one of those unfortunate cause and effects things, is the NFL realized that this, the draft is blowing up. It's becoming massive among NFL fans. And so they wanted the scouting combine to become more of a spectacle. In doing so, they completely rearranged all the different, the events and the times and all that kind of stuff. And it caused real concern because you have people there very early and they're not running their 40 time until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night or something ridiculous. And so there's genuine concern of these guys getting, their bodies going cold and then having to run a 40 and pulling a hamstring. And it just, so agents have decided to start pulling guys back and pulling them completely out of these events. You almost never see, real high top prospects anymore. It's pretty unfortunate, but this is still a very, very big event. There might not be the top of the top involved in this anymore. We'll see. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I said it or not, but I saw an answer was made by the quarterback out of Oregon, and that was to return to school. I'm scrolling here to try to find it. Again, I was passed out for a long time. I don't know if I'm getting sick or if I'm dying or what. That's pretty rare to just... I was falling asleep. I fell asleep in a recliner upstairs. Probably dying. Somebody do the right thing and start a GoFundMe for my family if I don't wake up tomorrow, all right? Do me that favor. I can't frickin' find it. Well, pretty sure it happened. I don't think I dreamt that. So, anywho, this is another big one in terms of getting some solid data on a lot of prospects. Some of it's a little bit fake. Some of it, somebody runs a fast time, and that's supposed to be the greatest thing in the history of the world. And number one, a lot of teams and everybody kind of already knew that, and so it doesn't really move the needle a ton. And then also at some point, we're going to have the unfortunate conversation about how little some of these things actually matter or correlate to anything, especially the 40. We put way too much emphasis on the 40-yard dash. But it's still fun, and it's still cool, and if we know anything about the Packers, it's that they overemphasize the 40. It's stupid, and we shouldn't care, but Gutekunst does, so we have to. But that is a very fun event, and maybe I don't think we'll do a live stream just because it's like an all-day freaking event, but maybe we'll do something with that. It's all day, and it's very slow is kind of the problem. Again, they're trying to make it a big event, and I think they've done themselves a disservice in the way that they do it, but whatever. So that's obviously a big one. Then you get into March, and on March 3rd, this is the day after the Combine, it says prior to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, deadline for clubs to designate franchise tag or transition players. Then you got, again, about a week later, March 9th through 11th. During the period beginning at 12 noon Eastern Time on March 9th and ending at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on March 11th, clubs are permitted to contact and enter into contract negotiations with certified agents of players who will become unrestricted free agents upon the expiration of their 2025 player contracts. Essentially, what it's saying is on March 11th, the new league year starts, and on that new league year, all the last year's contracts are gone. So a lot of people become free agents. This window, this March 9th through the 11th window, is the what's called legal tampering period. This is even though the 11th is officially, it says 2026 league year and free agency signing period begins at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Free agency really begins March 9th. That's when the big announcements immediately start being made because contact is made between teams and agents, all this stuff, and you start getting the Ian Rappaport updates and all that kind of stuff. Such and such has agreed to a deal with so-and-so. Now, technically, nothing is legally able to be binding until March 11th, and there are rarely situations where somebody will change their mind and end up going somewhere else. But March 9th is when a lot of that stuff starts, and the early part of free agency is when a lot of the big things get done. Although some of them do not. There's also speculation. This past year, obviously, we had the Myles Garrett speculation, the Max Crosby speculation, all kinds of speculation, including one very prominent person that was not expected to end up going anywhere, but did end up going somewhere, and that was to the Green Bay Packers. So wild and crazy stuff happens every single year. Don't know what exactly that kind of wild and crazy stuff is going to be, but I have every reason to believe this will be another pretty wild year. It's been, I feel like 5 years ago or so, things started getting, maybe more so, but about 5 years ago, things started getting pretty wild in the offseason, and that has not slowed down. March 29th through April 1st is the annual league meeting in Phoenix, Arizona. This doesn't seem like a big deal, but it can be and usually is because we haven't really heard from, well, that's not entirely true. I mean, it depends, with the some of the draft stuff, but a lot of times you haven't heard from anybody in Green Bay for a while, and this is where everybody gets together. So there's talks about, could they be discussing this or that with free agency, with different agents, with all that. But also any amount of, this is where we heard a lot of the stuff with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, right? It was the first time we got to hear from Mike Murphy and some different guys about the Aaron Rodgers situation. So a lot of reporters get to put cameras in the faces of Green Bay Packers personnel. I believe LaFleur and Gutekunst and Policy should all be there, if I'm not mistaken. I think they generally are. And so you'll have, again, a lot of the Packers beat will be there, as well as the national media folks. Again, I don't know what kind of, I'm trying to think. I can't imagine a ton of drama happening in Green Bay this year, although I say that and something always happens. But whatever the big question is going to be, this is kind of where some of that is going to come out. That's from March 29th through April 1st, and then April 6th, again, less than a week. You've got clubs that hired a new head coach after the end of 2025 regular season may begin off-season workout programs. So again, it's like, oh, the off-season, there's nothing going on. We're bringing guys back to work. There's going to be more like, everybody goes home periods. But again, and this shouldn't be the Packers, but, we'll see if the thing with LaFleur officially gets done. Again, I'm like 95% of it will at this point, but by April 6th, we have, teams bringing players back to begin their off-season workout programs. April 15th, deadline for clubs to time, test, visit, interview, or conduct physical examinations with a draft-eligible player at its club or facility. This is something else that's been taking place now throughout this entire period that hasn't even been brought up. The fact that the Packers get to do, in fact, there's something else I didn't mention also, which is pro days. So pro days, you've got individual schools will host events at their school where they'll put on little kind of like mini combines. And so there's going to be a lot of those events, which not only have tons of news and things, content for NFL draft prospects, but also you're going to be hearing about, there was, Brian Gutekunst or, this person from the Packers staff was in attendance. So you're going to hear a lot of that. But then there's also meetings, tons of meetings. Some of these meetings, and every team has a limited amount, will be the Packers bringing somebody into the facility to work them out. So April 15th is the end of that period. And then 2 days later, deadline for restricted free agents to sign offer sheets. 3 days later, clubs with returning head coaches may begin their off-season workout programs. Presumably that would be us. Now, these are generally very light programs. This is not, 11 on 11 full contact type stuff. That's very much later on. That's training camp stuff. But it's still a very cool time because as much as, again, it feels like everything is over, you've got guys coming back to the facility. You've got people back in the building. You got the coaches back to work, probably have some press conferences and whatnot. They've got things like strength and conditioning, medical evaluation, and rehab. So you probably will end up getting some talk about injury progression. How is this person doing, that person doing, what's going on with this guy, that guy, whatever. They're also going to begin a lot of their playbook installs and walkthroughs and whatnot. So if we have a new defensive coordinator, we're going to be having him kind of install some of the stuff that they're working on. Matt LaFleur, presumably, will be having whatever tweaks to his offense he'll be going through and working on getting that installed with the group that he has. The other great thing about this time is we get to have a big fight on social media about whether voluntary should actually be voluntary. Guys, not everybody is required to be there, and there will be a big argument about what it means if you don't show up. Most teams at this point have very few people not showing up. I feel like last year the Packers had nobody not show up, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong about that, though. April 22nd is the deadline for clubs to time test, visit, interview draft-eligible players at any location. So the in-house thing was a couple weeks ago. Now any visits, period, are done. That's 2 days later on April 22nd, and then the very next day is the NFL Draft in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We absolutely will be doing full live streams at this point, so I got to make sure that hopefully a lot of people are tuning in to the live streams because I'm hoping this is a pretty big event. April 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Probably gauge viewership. I'm guessing we'll have plenty of people there. That's my hope anyway. But if not, then, maybe I'll take day 3 off because that is a freaking grind, bro. But obviously I'll be working real hard to make sure that is a very built up and exciting, fun event. The draft, for anybody that doesn't really know how this whole thing works, day 1 is just the first round. Obviously the Packers are not involved in that this year, pending any kind of trades or massive trade ups. Day 2 is just rounds 2 and 3. Day 3 is an all-day event, rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. So it is a 3-day bonanza. This is where, all the work that has been put in this is sort of the culmination of that. I mean, not just for the teams, but for us. At this point, we all have guys that we've watched. We all have our favorites, our least favorites. Please don't, draft anybody but this guy. Probably less of that because we don't have a first-round pick. There's generally lesser opinions on second or later round picks. It's going to be an interesting year for that reason to see, how many of the diehards are willing to dig a little deeper because if you don't have a top 100 board, you might not have anybody, period. You could have a top 100 board and they don't draft anybody potentially. So, I think that's what happened with Jaden Reed, to be honest. I did a top 100 board and then did probably 10 to 15 more after that based on people who called in and made suggestions, and Reed wasn't even on that board. He was one of the next ones on the list, but never even got to him. And that was a second-round pick. But it's a lot of fun getting to know all these guys, getting to dig in. And then, of course, immediately after is when you really hammer, because you can only do so much on each prospect when you're going through hundreds of different people. And so once they actually draft them, that's when you turn it into, okay, we need to full-on deep dive into these guys. Let's know it. Let's read all the reports. Let's see what they did at the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, all that stuff that we talked about in the off-season program. Let's go back and watch all the tape and do all that kind of stuff on these guys and form our own opinions from there. Also, immediately after the draft is when undrafted free agency begins. And this is actually kind of an underrated aspect of this whole thing because there are guys that go undrafted that teams very, very, very much want. And it's kind of a weird thing because, initially when you're a draft prospect, you're just hoping anybody wants you. You know what I mean? It's kind of I can't, please, can anybody draft me? And then for some of these guys, they don't end up getting drafted. Nobody seems to want them. And as soon as it ticks over, suddenly you got everybody fighting over you. So all these teams that passed on you suddenly are begging you to come over by them. And this is also a time where the Green Bay Packers shine. Because of their reputation, putting UDFAs on the field and them having success in Green Bay, a lot of agents, when the Packers come calling, they will shuttle them to Green Bay. So that is one of the things the Packers have managed very well and have a very good reputation, long-standing reputation of UDFAs making the 53-man roster. And even the ones that don't initially, they'll find their way on there at some point. So that's a really fun time. So you got the draft, you got all this stuff going on, and then boom, here's 12 guys the Packers just signed, and we got to dig into all these different guys. Some of them, by the way, they'll be guys that you knew, like Nazir Stackhouse. I mean, there's dozens of examples over the years, but Nazir Stackhouse was expected to go before Warren Brinson for a lot of people, and it was a surprise for a lot of people that he went undrafted. So May 1st is the deadline for clubs to exercise fifth-year options for players selected in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. In this case, that's going to be Lucas Van Ness. So we'll have to have that discussion. That's not going to be a today thing, but we'll have to do that. Just the very off the top of my head thoughts. I don't know what's going to happen with Rashawn. My initial thought is they're going to try to get him to take a pay cut. And if he's willing, which I think he probably will be, there's a chance that he stays. Pretty much everybody else from what I've seen is 100% sure he's gone. And maybe there's a lot of merit to that. If he is, and he may be, I think that strengthens the idea that Van Ness is going to get that fifth-year option, and I don't necessarily see why not. I mean, you probably always want to do it unless you just really don't think they're going to make it, and I think Van Ness demonstrated this past year that he's looking real good, and they're going to have to rely on him, and he's looking real impressive. And it's kind of just an extension. It's a big upgrade in pay, but it's an extension of the 4-year contract. So it's kind of just putting off. And unless they say no and then try to just sign him to an extension. But I don't, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because he's been kind of a bad football player. This was his breakout year and he got hurt and missed half the year. So it makes sense to give him the option because you can always extend him anyway. So you give him the option. He plays through the final year of his deal this year. Next year would be that option. And again, rather than lame duck it, you can just, go ahead and offer him the contract. And the option actually helps with the extension because if you give him, just make up completely fake numbers, but let's say a 4-year, $100 million contract for the sake of easy math, $25 million a year, that's an extension on top of what you've already got. So with that all mixed in, the $25 million is actually significantly less over the 5 total years. So it still helps with extensions beyond that. But again, we'll talk about more of that when that comes, and that is May 1st. Then May 1st through 4th or May 8th through 11th, clubs may elect to hold their 1 3-day post-draft rookie minicamp. Go ahead.
Someone is at the front door.
From Friday through Saturday or Saturday through Monday on one of the 2 weeks following the draft. So again, another fun little thing. Now we got draft picks coming into Green Bay and we get to work them out and check them out and whatnot. And it's limited access to these types of events, but it's still awesome because guys that we've been talking about now for, 2 weeks, whatever it is, getting all excited about getting to know these guys, getting to look at and hear the interview. Now they're going to be in Green Bay. Great. Then May 13th, I know it's a lot, but this is kind of the point. I'm doing this in a very exhaustive fashion to demonstrate to you that the offseason is not the offseason. It's just not. The offseason, so far, it is May 13th. The offseason hasn't begun yet. And when I say offseason, I'm talking about the season in which football is just done. There's nothing going on. There's nothing to talk about. That has not happened through May 13th. Then May 13th through the 17th, NFLPA Rookie Premiere in Los Angeles, California. This is an event for some rookies. I don't know exactly how they pick it, but some of these guys, last year it was Golden and Savion went. They go to this event, and again, any event means media, and that's good for us. It's content. It's an opportunity to get to see Golden. It's opportunity to get to see Savion and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of an introduction to the business side of football. They have different events and marketing endorsements, media stuff there to try to get these guys locked into different things. So it's kind of funny. Like, we're going to teach you about the business side of things. Speaking of, here is Mr. Pepsi, who would like you to sponsor their product. Like, all right, should we do the seminar first? You want me to sign on today? I don't understand. But it's kind of the introduction to the off-field careers aspect. You know, outside of that check you make for on-field performance, there's the other stuff. There's also a big thing that we started talking about last year. It was the first time I was kind of made aware of it, and we'll see if it's still a thing and we end up talking about it or not. But kind of a weird thing going on with EA Sports and Madden, and some guys electing not to sign. Essentially, they try to push everybody in and be like, oh, yeah, just sign on the dotted line right here, no big deal. And the NFL takes care of all kinds of stuff, and they basically just throw a ton of money at you. But then they kind of own the rights to your NIL, your name, image, and likeness. To what degree, I don't exactly know, but like they put you on Madden, they put you on pretty much all the NFL products that the NFL allows, they put your name on. A lot of guys now are coming out going, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to sign that piece of paper. I think I'm going to negotiate my own ticket to get on Madden, and I'm going to have Madden come to me and do it that way. It's been kind of a unusual thing recently, so it'll be interesting to see if that continues. Then, 2 days after that ends, May 19th through the 20th, Spring League meeting in Orlando, Florida. I'd like to be there. We'll see if I can find a reason. It's the biggest. I just want the podcast to be big so I can just go to these events. I just need enough money to pay for my family, to be able to eat food, to pay my mortgage, and to be able to go to all these events. That's it. The league meeting is another very fun off-season thing because this is where they discuss, propose, and vote on rule changes. So I don't know what major rule changes we're looking at. I don't know if we're going back to the tush-push thing or whatever we're going to end up doing, but it is a league governance and business conference. June 1st is the deadline for the June 1 tender. Hear a lot about June 1 all the time. Everybody wants to June 1 players, which is cutting them with some kind of a June 1 designation. This is a different thing, but June 1 is a very big date, and everybody assumes that's the best path. Usually teams are not going to do that as much as fans want that to be a thing. But it is worth noting that June 1st is a big date for that. But there's also the deadline for prior club to send June 1 tender to its unsigned restricted free agents who received a qualifying offer for the right of first refusal. This stuff it's whatever. We'll see if it ever comes to this, but again, this kind of depends on what happens throughout free agency and how guys get treated and what they end up doing. The whole right of first refusal thing, again, we don't see it a ton, but who knows? June 15th, deadline for clubs to withdraw that offer. Late June, rookie readiness program. This is basically don't get caught driving with a pound of weed and a machine gun in your car class, more or less. Also, maybe invest some money and don't just go buy cars class. Then we've got about 2 weeks later, July 15th, is the deadline for clubs that designated a franchise tag to sign such player to a contract extension. After this date, the player may sign only a one-year contract with his prior club. Blah, 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 blah. Again, I don't think that's going to hit us. The interesting thing about this, though, is this is kind of one of those deadlines for teams that are kind of battling as far as will they, won't they sign, will they be released, could they be cut, whatever. That's where that becomes interesting more so for us. Then, just as mid-July, so around the same time, clubs are permitted to open preseason training camps for rookies, defined as players who have never signed an NFL contract with the club, beginning 7 days prior to the club's mandatory reporting date for veterans. Meaning what? Meaning roughly the third week in July, we have the beginning of training camp. Clubs may require first-year players to report on the designated reporting date for all rookies or at any time thereafter, including but not limited to the designated reporting date for veteran blah, 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 blah. Veteran quarterbacks and injured players may be required to report to the club's preseason training camp no earlier than 5 days immediately prior. Is another thing. It was, oh man, Jordan showed up. He's a real leader. Like, yeah, he was required. But no, for sure. I mean, doesn't mean he's not a leader. Just figure we should clear that up. So you got the rookies, then you got the quarterbacks and injured players showing up. Shortly thereafter, the rest of the team comes piling into training camp. And once training camp kicks off, that's basically like the start of the next season, in my mind. That's when, like, we start the clock, and here we go. So mid-July, everybody shows up. And this is also the fun part of time where it's like, this doesn't matter, but the next thing matters. Right? Well, the rookies showed up, but wait until everybody shows up. Then everybody shows up. Well, this doesn't matter because there's really no activity going on. Wait until guys get on the field, and then they get on the field. Well, this doesn't matter because they don't have the pads on yet. But once they get the pads on, then it's real football. And then they get the pads on. It's, well, this doesn't matter until like the preseason games. And then that doesn't matter until the regular season games. And then the regular season games don't matter until about week 4 or 5 till you can determine what your team is, which isn't even true because the team is different every single week. But that's the game you play. But the point is, once this starts, the mid-July thing, it kind of just keeps going. All right, I think there's like a week between the end of the preseason and the regular season, but otherwise, it's just straight football. And so the actual dead period, and again, it's not completely dead because there's some stuff going on, but it's basically like June, July. You could say mid-May through mid-July is kind of the actual dead period with some things going on in that period of time. So after the spring league meeting, which would be May 21st, there's nothing happening on May 21st. You've got the June 1 thing. You've got some of that stuff going on in June. But aside from that, there's nothing until training camp. So it's you could argue it's kind of a 2-month stretch of this might be tough to find some information. But the good news is not only are there things going on, but with all the crap that has happened prior to and is upcoming, it's not that hard to fill the gap in between. Not to mention, again, I mean, free agency is still happening. Guys can be signed, this, that, or the other. Some guys are not going to be signed yet, so there'll be opportunities there. And, there's still going to be speculation. There's still going to be drama. There's still going to be things that are happening. But again, you look at the calendar. Some things are more impactful than others, but from right now, when we still have the playoffs going on, all the way through May, easily through the end of April when the draft is. And then, of course, immediately after the draft, we have a lot of work to do there, as well as different things going on throughout May. April through May, pretty much still tons of football content going on, even though there aren't actual pads clashing going on anywhere around the NFL. So this is sort of a peek at what the offseason looks like for those that have not participated. It's not what a lot of people would think. It's not what I used to think. It was when I started sort of doing year-round, it was like, I don't think I can make it through the offseason. And I made it, and I was kind of impressed with myself and shocked and all that kind of stuff. And you do have to do a couple deep dives here and there once in a while, because things get a little bit thin. But it's actually shocking how much, if you want to be a year-round NFL fan, it's not that hard. Again, June is about the only struggle point. Halfway through July, football starts. We're back at it. When training camp starts, 2026 has officially begun. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. And tomorrow, obviously, we'll pick up on this. I genuinely believe, very, very soon something's going to get done. But essentially, tomorrow we get started on this schedule. We continue on with some of the coaching stuff. We get going hard on, the GM evaluation, the team evaluation, looking at the defense, the offense, the special teams, so that we have a very clear picture on what is, what was, what needs to happen. NFL draft, free agency, and then, again, coaching outside of just Matt LaFleur, defensive coordinator, all that stuff. We'll see who gets hired away and whatnot. But Have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.